Good morning, everyone. Happy St. Patrick's Day. As a McAuliffe, I'm authorized to say that. Thank you all for wearing green. Um, so first, I just want to begin today by thanking everyone for coming to this in-person conference, our first since 2020. I know a lot of people made sacrifices, not just in their workplace, but at home to be here. So it really means a lot to me and to Elisa. And I think we can all agree that nothing compares to just being in person. And I think sometimes the best ideas for research too comes out of meetings like this. So thank you so much. Um, I also want to say hello to everyone on Zoom. We're working very hard to make sure that you guys all feel included. So please keep asking questions. And while we have the survey for our in-person audience, we will also be sending out something probably next week for our Zoom audience as well. So you can give us some feedback on how we can keep improving meetings like this. I want to say thank you to our board, who we got to hang out with a little bit last night. You guys mean the world to us. We appreciate your guidance and everything you do for us throughout the year. I want to say thank you to the Williamsburg. The staff has been so accommodating. I don't think she's working yet. Maybe she'll be here later, but I was speaking with one of the staff members yesterday after our conference. Her name is Bella, and it was just a really nice heart-to-heart, and it just kind of reminds you that you really never know whose life you're impacting and who's listening. So just thank you all for being a part of this community, because it really does extend beyond, what we realize. Thank you to Dream Builders. I think we will all never forget what we got to experience yesterday with Connor getting his cells. Just outrageous. So thank you so much for being able to think quick on your feet, and that we were able to get those Zoom links working. Just unbelievable. So thank you for that, and thank you for your support with this 3-day meeting. And then thank you to Elisa for bringing us all back to Brooklyn. And then, of course, last but not least, thank you to our sponsors, Bluebird Bio and Travere, not just for making this meeting possible, but for being here. That means so much to us, and for helping us with all our big ideas. So thank you. And for anyone who's new today that wasn't here yesterday, the Wi-Fi was just up previously, so you want to get on that public, and it's heritage. Okay, so I know Elisa went over this briefly yesterday, but this is the map, and there's a lot of green. It's a really good thing. There's now over 3 million babies being screened annually for ALD, which I just double checked with Elisa. That's 85%, which is just phenomenal. I really appreciate, yes, of course. Yes. And of course, that's in large part to, all the local advocates too that have worked, in their own states to help, move this forward. And I think this is going to be a very short, hopefully, presentation next year, because if we look and see what the future holds, there's only 15 states left that aren't, and 11 are expected to start screening by the end of 2023. So, I mean, we'll see. Sometimes there are kind of like hiccups in the road, but it's really exciting. I do also just want to acknowledge the 6 states that came on in 2022. So Arizona, Idaho, North Carolina, Virginia, Ohio, and New Jersey. And I also want to say thank you to our 2 presenters yesterday, Fran from Arizona, and also Dr. Reem from Ohio, for giving their updates and insights into, how that implementation got started. And thank you for sharing that too, because we do know how much work goes on behind the scenes, and I think it's so important for our families too to get a little glimpse into that. Okay, so looking ahead, I was thinking about it this morning, and I've been speaking at this conference since 2019 for different reasons, but this is the first time I'm doing the newborn screening update presentation in person, which means I can just call on people if they live on their state. So look alive, people. So Alabama, we know they're going to be starting soon. I think their next newborn screening advisory committee meeting is in May. It's going to happen very soon. I'm hoping they have good news for us when they have their next meeting. Lots of exciting things going on in Iowa. I know I've seen a lot of the folks from Iowa on Zoom, so thank you for being here. So their goal is to be running by July 1st. And they're a special state because they have the capability to also screen for Alaska, North Dakota, and South Dakota. So that doesn't mean that they'll all start at the same time. But the good news is Iowa submitted a application for a CDC grant to help get ALD going, and both Alaska and South Dakota did um, put letters of support in with that grant application. So we take that as a good sign. So that's going to be really exciting. Um, Kansas, we have our local advocate Kirsten Finn, who's been so wonderful. I mean, she yeah, she moved from Canada, and it was probably a matter of days, I think, before she was introducing herself to all the right people, and she's been able to go to meetings in person. So I'll let you speak. I know you were at the last meeting in person. If there's anything you'd like to share, I don't know why that's happening. I hope it's not the weather, because it was gorgeous when I walked over here this morning.
Okay, there it is. Yeah, so just last week I sat in on some focus groups with the Kansas newborn screening team, just working on the parent letters that are going to be going out, the fact sheets that are going to be going out, that kind of thing. They're going full speed ahead with it, which is great. The pilot is supposed to start in the spring, and they're hoping to be live with it at the very latest, probably January of 2024.
Super, super exciting. Thank you for that. Um, Louisiana is shooting for June of this year. Maryland. Dr. Fatimi, do you want me to give you the mic, or should we just? We don't know about Maryland, right? Is there anything? Yeah. Yeah, we actually did check in just before the meeting with some of our friends at PerkinElmer because we know that they work in that state, and they agreed that there's no go live date to share there yet. So we'll stay tuned on that one. Um, Mississippi is also shooting for July 1st. South Carolina, I know was in validation last year, so I would imagine, I don't know if we have a recent update from them, but it's probably going to be soon. And then Wisconsin, we were actually just talking about this morning, should also be this year. So really, really exciting stuff. So then looking beyond 2023, so Hawaii, if she didn't retire yet, it's probably going to happen soon. They'll be losing their lab director of over 20 years. But the last time Elisa spoke with them, they did express wanting to add ALD and some of the other remaining conditions on the RUSP that they're not yet screening for. Massachusetts, still running as a pilot, along with SMA, MPS1, and Pompeii. There's some exciting stuff going on in Montana now. So we just submitted a very lengthy nomination package to the state there with the help of our local advocate. His name is Steve. Shout out to Steve if you're listening. And it's going to be reviewed in their advisory committee next month. I think it's April 6th. So that should be really exciting. And then Nevada was awarded also that same CDC grant that I referred to earlier last year to be adding ALD and SMA. So all good things. So that's kind of the ALD breakdown, but what's just as much a part of the ALD Alliance mission is it goes beyond ALD. It really comes down to what Elisa experienced after passing Aiden's Law and kind of realizing what she calls, and it's the right term, this broken system of having to do this 49 other times. So this part of our mission at least does go beyond the ALD world. And what we've kind of chosen to latch on to as the gold standard is following this RUSP in terms of what we can dedicate our time for in terms of advocacy. So you might hear us use that term a lot. I just want to give a little background information for those who may not know. So RUSP stands for the Recommended Uniform Screening Panel. It's a list of disorders that the Secretary of the Department of Health and Human Services recommends for states to screen as part of their state universal newborn screening program. So it's the same thing. There has to be a nomination. It's also a very lengthy process, a lot of work for advocacy groups and families, and so much help too from the clinicians that sees these families. It's just a wonderful collaboration, but it's a lot of work. The best way I can simplify it, the two really I think most important things is that there's a valid newborn screening test and a valid treatment that will make a difference. So ALD was added to the RUSP in 2016, and it's one of 37 conditions currently on there. So I know this is a little bit more complicated than our ALD newborn screening map, and I apologize. I know it's a lot of information, but I think the visual is important just to kind of see the inequality that exists. So the diseases that we've listed are conditions on the RUSP that aren't being screened for in all 50 states. So there's Pompe, MPS1, ALD, SMA, MPS2, and GAMS, which was only just recently added in January. The dates and the years in parentheses are when they were added. So currently no state is screening for all 37 conditions, but that's understandable because like we said, GAMS was just added. And then I believe it's our states in yellow that I have there screening for, there's 30 states, screening for like the core four that we've been focused on that, have been on for quite a while. So yeah, it's interesting. And, like I said, this is just as much a part of our mission as fighting for the ALD newborn screening is. So the most important word in this slide is funding. I think it's so important to acknowledge, especially with our wonderful newborn screening lab staff here, that of course all these states want to be screening for these conditions, but funding is such a huge issue. I was so glad Dr. Ream during her presentation yesterday talked about, needing to have the electricity fixed because there's all these things, like these are things you need to get a lab running and going, and there's just so many obstacles. COVID was like, I know, a whole other mess. So just thank you so much to our lab staff who works so hard to make sure that our babies get these diagnoses. It's so important, but they need help. To me, it's so interesting to just even step back and see what they have to do, that the money's not just there for them, that they have to apply for these really lengthy and detailed grants just to do their job. So again, it's a part of our mission to try to help them as much as possible. And these are the reasons why. So there's a 10 or more plus year delay once a disease gets added to the RUSP for implementation. So that's what leads to what we've dubbed death by zip code, and it shouldn't exist. There was a newborn screening modernization study done. I guess at this point now it's over a year old, but one of the key things to come out of it, and 85% of the people agreed, it's a problem. We need to expand this federal funding to the states so they can do their job. For those of you that follow newborn screening advocacy separate from ALD, you might be familiar with these last two bullet points. So the newborn screening reauthorization, whole other fight for another meeting. We need a lot more time. It's wonderful and we need to get it passed, but it doesn't really address this issue of funding, which is why it's something that we really work so hard on at the ALD Alliance. And then another great organization, the Every Life Foundation, has been working on this RUSP alignment legislation. So they kind of handpick 2 or 3 states each year and work with local legislators to get something passed, which is good. I think it leads to a level of transparency for their constituents, which is good. There's some accountability where like you kind of have to acknowledge, okay, this is on the RUSP, we have to be looking at it. But again, it doesn't solve the issue of the funding. And we're seeing that play out in real life, even with the states that have had this legislation passed. So this is very lengthy. I won't read the whole thing, but kind of our solution to this is something called appropriations, which, it's not a bill. You kind of just want to think of it as like a very small line item in a budget, and it's just money, trying to squeeze this little number in. 15 million sounds like a lot, but it's not, for what needs to be done. So this was our language that was submitted last year, requesting 15 million to be set aside for timely implementation of newborn screening conditions with the goal of complete RUSP implementation in all 50 states by 2025. And the rest of the numbers are a little outdated just because this was last year, but just so you can kind of get an idea, trying to prevent deaths, disability, and to support the states to get the staff and the equipment that they need. And we typically do this in the form of the CDC grant program, just because that's just the feedback that we've received from the states. It's kind of like the best way to do it, that exists. So this map is from the CDC website. The states in yellow are states that have previously been awarded CDC grants to help. Used for all different things. The money can be used to bring on RUSP conditions. It could be, to expand a follow-up program, things like that. We really had a record number of applicants last year. That might be because we very politely reached out to a lot of states to let them know that this opportunity existed through what we call our RUSP Coalition, which I have to thank Rose and Chris from Trevere. They've given us so much guidance in helping us get information like this out. So yeah, with their help, we reached out, and 10 states applied for the CDC grant last year, but only 5 received money, and it wasn't because they were all strong applications. There just wasn't enough money to go around. So Arizona, Nevada, Texas, Utah, and Wisconsin received funding, and Arkansas, Colorado, Iowa, Ohio, and Michigan are listed as ABU, so that means their applications were approved, but again, the funding wasn't there. So that's what we're trying to fix, or at least help. So this is our current state of affairs. Last year, with that appropriations language, there was a Dear Colleague introduced. So what that means is that you have a Republican and you have a Democrat. They send out a letter to their colleagues saying, please sign on to this, please support it. There were 25 congressional members that signed on, which was the highest we ever had, so that was great. A lot of bipartisan support. We had so many meetings throughout the year with different legislators. So thank you to any advocates, not just in the ALD world, but other conditions that might be on the RUSP that were able to hop on calls or Zoom meetings at the last minute to kind of share their story. At the end of the day, there was 1 million that was designated at the end, which we're hoping will possibly help fund 2 more states on the ABU list, but that remains to be seen. I know something on our to-do list after this meeting is to have another sit down with the CDC and kind of see where their heads are at. And we're right now, as we speak, in the planning phases of how we're going to approach this year, in light of some recent things that have happened. So for new appropriations language, of course, we're going to still acknowledge this lag in the RUSP time for implementation. We're, of course, keeping our slogan, for lack of a better word, we have to eradicate death by zip code. There was a meeting last month, ACHDNC. I am so bad at acronyms, Elisa. You should be, yeah. But it's, part of their job is to meet and review conditions that are nominated to the RUSP. And there was a 2-day meeting where Crabbe was reviewed and voted on, and then also the second day, the Duchenne community was also looking for, hopefully, advancement in having their stuff move into evidence review. Again, it's content for a whole other different meeting, but for families and for people on the advocacy side and clinicians too, who have spent so much time working with these patients, it was a disappointment because the vote, at least for Crabbe, was 7-7 because there was no majority. It did not move forward on the RUSP. and Duchenne also did not move into evidence review. So there were some things in the way the meeting that was held that we think could be done better. So for example, having an even number of committee members it goes against the charter even, so we're probably going to address that so that that doesn't happen. And I think we can all agree that more patient representation on committees like that is super important. So we're probably going to include that in our language as well. So this is the last slide, how you can help. So reach out to us. Even if your state is already screening, this is something I think that we forget to point out. So even if your state's already on board, it doesn't matter because your local politician might serve on a committee that's like the appropriations committee or the help committee, things that might make a difference when we're advocating at that federal level. So don't hesitate to reach out just because your state is already screening. Those are our email addresses. You can follow us on social media too to stay up to date. I added this at the last minute, but I would encourage you to do it. So subscribe to your state's Department of Health website for updates. I'm crazy and I subscribe to all the states, so it's really interesting getting emails, you know, and just kind of like what the culture is. Like I always know like what's going on in Texas if there's bad weather because I subscribe to their newborn screening email list. Arizona sends me really cool, healthy recipes, which I love. I enjoy them. I forwarded one to Elisa not that long ago. But in all seriousness, it's a good way to kind of stay up to date, at least in your own state, of what's going on. And all of these meetings pretty much have to be open to the public. I mean, now with Zoom, it's a little bit more accessible. So I would encourage you to do it. It's a really cool learning experience, if nothing else. And if sometimes it's a little hard to find them on certain state websites. So if you're having trouble finding that information, you can reach out to us, and of course, we'll help you. I think it would be great to attend a meeting. You know, you might even be able to help out another advocate who's a little bit further back in the newborn screening process. I've met some really great people just chatting in Zoom at, you know, some of these meetings. And I do just want to say also, timing is everything. So don't be upset if you reach out to us and, you know, 8 months go by, you know, why haven't you called me? I want to help. A lot of times it's just getting into the right legislator's office at the right time. Sometimes there's no warning. And I think a really good example of this is Christy. We reached out to you not that long ago. It was like this last minute thing. We got an in from someone else in the rare disease community with a different condition who went to college with this congressman. And Christy was the closest person by zip code to them. And so we reached out to her, and she's awesome. It worked. It was a great meeting. So just don't take it personal if you reach out and we don't call. Like, we have our database, and you know, when we have those meetings, of course, we're going to reach out at the right time. So I think that's everything. Thank you so much. Yeah, okay, thank you.